if he's actually capable of being played in the meta just due to his passive and the way he can control zones. So we'll see Samsung start out on the blue side this evening.
The fun thing about these new seasons is that it feels like every series has a new narrative. None of these teams have been able to look over their champions VODs and kind of see what's good in the overall champions meta. So one series, Rek'Sai will be a top pick ban. The next series, Mundo won't even be considered after being a first pick. So I feel like every match this week will have its own narrative, and then more of a season-long meta will develop in the first weeks of the season.
Yeah, so pretty common bans that we're seeing so far. At least the ban meta has been relatively consistent, and that Misfortune definitely hitting the highest priority for that blue side first pick that we've seen in the first couple of days. But again, this is 5.24. If you are going to be watching the EU LCS later tonight, they will be playing on 6-1, so MF will fall down a bit in terms of that priority. Kindred, the next ban for mFire.
Be really interested to see if Misfortune sticks around. After all, her laning is the big target that you don't really want to max E when it loses 90 base damage at highest level, but the bullet time zone control is still relevant. So will it fall from the picks and bans? Probably, but maybe still a contender given the spell-casting nature of popular ADs right now.
I just don't think it's going to be first pick blue side.
First rotation blue side, sure.
Okay, so Kalista, the final ban for Samsung. And now we wait for the last red side ban. Ryze is still available, Fiora is still available, and that's going to be the ban in the end. So we're in a situation where Ryze could well be the first pick in. Découvrez is a player who has played Ryze even when Ryze was not in the meta, so this is a big comfort pick for Découvrez.
The patch before the Ryze changes came through, he was playing Ryze, and of course Ryze burst out when he saw his mini rework or buffs that came through. And Découvrez is a fearsome Ryze player, so already a flex pick, start of a good draft. But that means that Gangplank's available.
Gangplank will be snapped up, most likely by mFire. They'll take the Alistar as well. One of the highest priority supports alongside Trundle that we've seen, just valuing that tankiness so highly in the meta that lacks a lot of armor penetration or AD carry relevance when it comes to dealing with tanks. Ambition here, taking a look at that Rek'Sai, and that'll be the lock for JJ. Thinking about Lucian.
Biggest emerging story I've seen so far this week has been the rise of Rek'Sai. We talked about it last series, but in a world with less vision, Tremor Sense has just become more and more valuable as a ability, and thus Rek'Sai, as a reliable tank otherwise, has really shot up in the big ban priority.
Certainly has. So next two picks, round 2 of the draft. Corki, hovered over right now. Nice flex pick so that they will know the location of the Ryze before they actually commit.
Mundo's still available?
Lysandra actually, a ban that we frequently see, not getting picked up too early.
Mundo and Lysandra both available. Oh boy.
Here it comes. Here it comes, Swamp Smithy. That is probably going to be a jungle Graves, unless we see the top lane Graves. It is, what we can say about Graves is he's not going to be played AD carry.
Probably not.
He is really bad in lane pre-6. Really bad.
You could, I guess, flex it in one of those horror scenarios, but you're right. It's very unlikely in this scenario, but it's not going to be Chaser level Graves, but still. We actually mentioned that Crush had changed from AD to jungle. Why not take an AD with him to the jungle?
And I think that's an excellent point. So Crown here, looking for the safety of a Victor pick. And we have seen that. Victor LeBlanc be highly prioritized when you have to go in blind to a matchup, and so that'll be the lock. And Trundle, the solid support, maybe coming in last here just to push this Graves out, and there it will be. So full comp now available, and it will be Découvrez taking the Ryze in the top side, which, see what this ends up being. It could be top Graves and Poppy jungle. As weird as that sounds, that is a thing that can happen these days.
Feels like Poppy jungle and support have kind of been the two roles, at least in Korea, that she's been most popularly seen in. Her W ability is massively strong against dashes. So for example, the Rek'Sai Burrow would be interrupted by the W. Not too many other dashes though, apart from Lucian's, I guess, on the side of Samsung.
I would love to see a jungle Poppy and a top Graves. We were so hyped about top Graves maybe being played. Oh. That is disappointing. First Nautilus of the season, though. Not something that many people have wanted, but against Ryze and Victor, who are easily targetable with that Nautilus ultimate, can be good, but that would mean it would be a top Nautilus, perhaps?
Yep.
So
teams have definitely experimented with top Nautilus. You have that freedom of build, as most tanks do. Rod of Ages is an option. You could just go for the Righteous Glory. A lot of damage coming in from the jungle. And the mixed damage from Corki means they're not an exclusively physical damage comp. Of course, you can go a little bit heavier on physical damage in a meta where Thunderlords is so popular to give you that latent magic damage on top.
yeah, and this is a huge burst damage composition. You think about the power of Corki and Graves, and of course that Gangplank in the late game. If they hit you with the barrels and a rocket and a Graves Q, you are going to be very much hurting.
More simply, if Ryze or Victor ever steps out of line, the ultimate comes through from Nautilus, targeted CC into, as you mentioned, sheer burst. This is spicy, and that's great to see from a new lineup of unheralded players. They're going for something rather than just trying to play the meta.
Yeah, I really like it, actually. We'll see how Hippo does on this top lane Nautilus, something that we saw Trace play quite a bit in the last year on Jin, but not something I expected to see coming into the early parts of the 2016 season. Cuvée back on his rise, and both teams have some pretty nice late game power. Should be exciting team fights as we head into game one here.
Should see ambition rotating around Cuvée. If you get this Ryze going, even Nautilus tankiness won't be enough to stop the oppressive Ryze in the top lane.
Indeed. So game one here coming up. mFire versus Samsung. Nice spasm camera there to start it off.
Nice to hear mFire retaining some fans, I would assume, from their Najin days.
A bit of a hard off season for Najin fans.
How many Korean girls do you think had to transfer to China during the off season when Watch left?
Well, some of them probably went because Peanut's also very popular over to the Rocks Tigers.
I mean, relocating to China is a bit more of a big move to relocating to Rocks Tigers games, Monty.
Yeah, well, relocating to the LSBL is not exactly a glory move here from Watch.
I think of it like pro soccer players going to Qatar for their last payday.
Or to the MLS, you know. Pull a Beckham, just head right over to the LA Galaxy.
I like how we both went closer to home, because I was actually born in Qatar, so keeping it close to home.
How do you feel about that World Cup?
Yeah, I haven't been to Qatar since I was born there, so there's that.
I see. The long-term absence.
I'll watch the World Cup from the comfort of Korea. That's my plan.
I will not watch the World Cup.
I'll rope you into a game at some point.
I regretted the last World Cup I watched was like in 2012.
Okay.
Because Spain won that one, and the Spanish style of play was literally the most boring thing I've ever seen.
Total football, which meant passing it in the midfield a lot.
Yep, and just they score one goal and then just pass it around the midfield for the rest of the game. It was awful.
Well, let's talk about a different play style. Graves jungle, because a lot of people might be wondering, why is Graves suddenly a jungler? He was a very oppressive AD carry right when he was reworked and saw some nerfs, as Guga takes a lot of damage. A lot of damage.
Well, he's coming off being an AD carry, so perhaps getting used to the old sport trading right here.
I like how they have an AD carry that's gone to jungle, and an AD carry that's now support. That's like when Samsung had 3 people that could play mid lane Fizz and not much else. But the thing about Graves is that, so one of the things in his rework is that his auto attack pushes back monsters and minions, as this trading probably isn't going to lead to any kills. So he's able to kite Cam's real. You'll notice he started the refillable potion and can stay sustained between that and the fact that Machete, another big change in the preseason, has 8% lifesteal against minions and monsters. Uniquely, Graves has effectively his old buckshot as an auto attack. That's an AoE ability, so when he gets in melee range of creeps, he's often healing for 40 health, you know, a couple of levels into the game, just from That's the same. So a very sustained clear and good burst damage when he ganks.
Yeah, and the other major factor too is the delayed secondary damage on his Q. So sometimes it can be hard to hit if you're actually in a laning phase.
Sure.
But if you're just
those
killing monsters
stick next to the walls a lot.
Yeah, makes it for a very fast clear. You see Crush now eyeballing Ambition, going to take away the Scuttle Crab for a quick clear. Cuvée left by himself, and you know, they have to make some plays on this Rise before he gets too powered up. But that means that they're going to have ganks in this top lane. And with Crush found out on that bottom side, should be pretty free farming for Cuvée, at least in the beginning.
And we saw almost there what Bubbling showed yesterday with the Kindred. Kindred, Graves, both of them can invade aggressively. They have dashes, and they do so much early damage that even the old top-tier junglers have a hard time trading with champions like Graves and Kindred, levels 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that a bit yesterday when the early invade from Bubbling, just a straight-up 1v1 in the enemy jungle.
On full display then, and this wraparound. No, there's a lot of vision defensively for Cuvée on top.
Yeah. Smart from Cuvée, just gets the wards right in as Crush has the opportunity to switch into the topside jungle. Wraith and Core JJ didn't take too much of an advantage, and there's a flash away from the hook. Hippo tries to hit it, so they get a summoner spell as Crush looks for the gank after walking up through the river.
There's going to be wave clear wars in mid. Of course, Gangplank going to have a harder time picking up CS. Only has his Q for range farming until he gets a few more levels in E, but the barrel farming later in the game. Some items to back that up. If you power through and farm the mid lane Gangplank, you'll definitely feel that pinch in the late game if you're Samsung.
Yep, but you do see Crown taking that opportunity to get a nice ward there by the Raptor buff. Ambition now setting up, but he's not going to actually get much done right here. Crush is going to take a bit of poke damage there from a Prey Seeker Death Ray combination right over the pit. And
Crown stole out the Raptor as well.
Very nice. So, good little play there. Crown taking advantage of some early pressure to do a little bit of denial. So Cuvée now safely back under his turret. We'll just keep farming up, evening up this CS as the wave hits. And Hippo doing a nice push so he doesn't have to TP right back into lane.
He actually got a really good back timing himself, yep. Cuvée. You'll notice that he didn't have to use his teleport and had his tier and Sapphire Crystal already, so back time is good for both top laners.
Indeed, Ambition here playing pretty aggressively against this Graves early. Looks like they just want that vision onto him and to delay him as much as possible. Bit of harassment and more wards. Prey Seeker over the wall.
I mean, specifically the thing here is that Crush has a very low pressure mid laner when it comes to rotating around mid. No CC, no ult yet. Actually, ult just achieved, but you can feel very confident invading when it's a pre-6 game plan that's going to react from the mid lane.
Well, it's also just important to keep eyes on him right now, too, so that Cuvée has that opportunity to free farm with his tier and really scale up into the late game. And that's going to allow it. They have pretty much total vision around this Graves, as long as he's on that bottom side. Making it quite easy. Cuvée starting to trade a bit more aggressively.
Big question for Samsung and big question for Ambition, who's a player that looked near the end of his career in the latter days at CJ, now revitalized or potentially revitalized over on this Samsung lineup. The shocking thing about Ambition was he never seemed to develop a true relationship with his support. We always talk about jungle support duos, Dandy and Mata, perhaps the most famous of those. Never felt like Ambition was on the same page with Mad Life, and now he finds himself with Wraith, another experienced support who's played on a top team. Can he develop that synergy to allow for the more effective duo invades rather than just taking it all on himself to both tussle with the enemy jungler and invade for vision?
Yeah, it really did feel, despite this very long period of a year that he had to grow into the jungle role, that he would invade blindly and frequently die or have to be bailed out by Thresh Lanterns to actually make plays, and that risky style didn't serve CJ very well. Hippo actually just going to get caught in here. Cuvée doesn't have any mana to follow up.
Completely out of mana, has teleport, but the minion wave pushed right to his turret. Graves already backed off, so it's going to miss a bit of CS at the top.
Has the backup here from Ambition. They're not going to find much. Go ahead and take that Scuttle Crab. And Surprisingly, passive early game. Both teams very much just focused on farming and keeping eyes on each other's junglers, so really not very many gank opportunities outside of that.
More of a season-long meta will develop in the first weeks of the season.
Yeah, so pretty common bans that we're seeing so far. At least the ban meta has been relatively consistent, and that Misfortune definitely hitting the highest priority for that blue side first pick that we've seen in the first couple of days. But again, this is 5.24. If you are going to be watching the EU LCS later tonight, they will be playing on 6-1, so MF will fall down a bit in terms of that priority. Kindred, the next ban for mFire. Most likely by mFire. They'll take the Alistair as well. One of the highest priority supports alongside Trundle that we've seen, just valuing that tankiness so highly in the meta that lacks a lot of armor penetration or AD carry relevance when it comes to dealing with tanks. Ambition here, taking a look at that Rek'Sai, and that'll be the lock for JJ. Thinking about Lucian.
Biggest emerging story I've seen so far this week has been the rise of Rek'Sai. We talked about it last series, but
Ryze is still available, Fiora is still available, and that's going to be the ban in the end. So we're in a situation where Ryze could well be the first pick, and Découvrez is a player who has played Ryze even when Ryze was not in the meta, so this is a big comfort pick for Découvrez.
The patch before the Ryze changes came through, he was playing Ryze, and of course Ryze burst out when he saw his mini rework or buffs that came through, and Découvrez is a fearsome Ryze player, so already a flex pick, start of a good draft, but that means that Gangplank's available.
Gangplank will be snapped up if he's actually capable of being played in the meta, just due to his passive and the way he can control zones. So we'll see Samsung start out on the blue side this evening.
The fun thing about these new seasons is that it feels like every series has a new narrative. None of these teams have been able to look over their champions VODs and kind of see what's good in the overall champions meta. So one series, Rek'Sai will be a top pick ban. The next series, Mundo won't even be considered after being a first pick. So I feel like every match this week will have its own narrative, and then be really interested to see if Misfortune sticks around. After all, her laning is the big target that you don't really want to max E when it loses 90 base damage at highest level, but the bullet time zone control is still relevant, so will it fall from the picks and bans? Probably, but maybe still a contender given the spell-casting nature of popular ADs right now.
I just don't think it's going to be first pick blue side.
First rotation blue side, sure.
Okay, so Kalista, the final ban for Samsung. And now we wait for the last red side ban.